Good afternoon, everybody. And we're so happy to be back again today. And Ivan and I have been given the assignment to talk about maple syrup. And we'd just like to let you know that after our initial talk, we have 2 hours. The first hour will be a lecture with pictures here. And right after that, we will be giving tastes of maple syrup to anybody who wants them, and we'll be doing that down here. And right after that, we're going to be taking you over to the trees and showing you how to drill and put a spile in a tree and
tap the tree. Don't expect any sap today, but we'll show you how to put the spile in anyway.
Okay, and one more thing before we get into our actual talk, and that is, at the moment we do have our phone number and our email address on the screen. However, we have some business cards if anybody would like to contact us.
See me after. I got them in my pocket.
If you want.
I was going to bring some more, but I do have some in my pocket.
Now we'd like to begin with prayer, so if we could just bow our heads, please.
Our Father, today we thank you for this wonderful weather we're having. We thank you for all your blessings, and we thank you for the country that we can come out and see nature and learn more about you. We ask, Lord, your Spirit be here with each one today. And as people are contemplating a new life in the country, we ask that you be with them and guide them today and every day. Be with each one of us, for us in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Just one thing before we start. Yesterday there was one pest in the garden that I failed to mention, and that's a cutworm. A cutworm. If you transplant a plant, or you see a plant that isn't transplanted and you see it withered off for no apparent reason, it hadn't been healthy, dig around where the plant was and you'll probably find a white grub about 1 inch long and size of my finger just under the surface. Kill it. It's a cutworm. They cut the plant off right below the surface. And my parents, they lost 4,000 plants to cutworm 1 year out of 6,000.
Wow.
That's why they only go 3 or 4 years, strawberries one place and move to another. But this 1 year they were very bad, and we lost about 4,000 plants out of 6,000 plants.
So that's the white grub?
It's a white grub, and you'll find it right underneath the surface of the ground. You'll see the plant will be laying there for no apparent reason. Just dig there and you'll find this white grub. It chews the plant off right below the surface. They're not a big plague. We don't usually have them in our garden, the odd one, but they can be. There was a disaster that 1 year for that one crop of strawberries. I just thought I wanted to mention that before we started here.
Okay, maple syrup. And at the very first, we have to gather our supplies. So that's what we're going to talk about first, and we're going to explain each thing we have to gather, and then we'll get into the process.
An interesting note, in the 1930s, when money was tight, he didn't have any money. My dad made spiles, and he tapped. There's a homemade spile, probably about 80 years old. It's the only one I got left, made out of cedar. You see how he whittled it, drilled a hole, and he took wooden boards and he nailed them together for troughs to catch the sap, and they leaked some. But there was no money. You couldn't afford a spile. You couldn't afford a bucket. So he made them and put them in, and you put the container underneath there, and you boiled syrup. You made syrup that way. Interesting what you did when there was no money. There was lots of time. Nobody was working. So you had lots of time. So just an interesting thing. We've kept it all these years for a keepsake. Yeah, we're going to gather the supplies. Well, first of all, we store the supplies away for a year. And we've got to get all those supplies out, which includes buckets. I got some buckets here. We got about, let's see, I got over 300 of these buckets. We take them out, we got to wash them. I also got some pipelines that we have in the buckets like this. We got to wash them all too. So it's quite a thing. We take them out, get them ready, wash them. Takes about a day. And Then you see the tractor here with the cart. There's chains on the tractor. They stay on till you get done, because when the snow goes, there's still mud. And I did hang the tractor up for the first time ever. I think I hung it right up in the mud this spring. But anyway, when we get done after that, then we put the buckets in and in the cart. We usually have 2 cart loads, and we go and start tapping them. Go ahead.
Okay, yes.
Get away.
Click, please. Okay, so here we see a kettle with hot water, or for hot water. This kettle, you could say, oh, that old little thing, what's that for? We really desperately use that one all the time, because this kettle gets hot on the wood stove, and it is used for all the sticky syrup. So when a pot is finished, we pour the hot water, the boiling water into it, and it doesn't take any time at all to clean anything with syrup in it if you've got hot water. So
you might notice in this picture, you see the kettle, but to the left of the kettle you see 2 cold pack canners. They probably got about 12 liters of syrup in each one, and they're probably about 24 liters of syrup. To the right you see a pot with a sieve in it, and underneath that sieve there's a warming closet. This stove has a very big warming closet for water. It'll probably hold about 30 liters. It'll hold close to 30 liters of water in this one. So this is at the sugar camp for finishing off the syrup. We'll talk about more about that later.
okay, and this is now jugs.
These are 4-liter jugs. I got a 4-liter there and a 2-liter, and we got 1 liter, but most of it we sell in 4-liter jugs. If you're going to keep the syrup for a long time, you can either freeze it in the 4-liter jugs and put it in the freezer, or else you can put it in glass, bring it to a boil, and can it in glass. For ourselves, we put it in glass, but I find that the glass is kind of, you got to be really careful. It breaks. And when I was growing up, you can still get tin cans, metal. You can still get them, but my parents used metal. But I prefer the plastic myself. It's a lot easier to. You don't have to worry about it near as much of getting broke or punctured or that.
Okay, and here we have buckets of cold water. Now, water is so very important to take up to the sugar camp, because we don't have running water up there. And both of these buckets are filled with water every morning. And so that we, and you won't believe this, but our stove, our cook stove, has such a big reservoir at the end that Ivan dumps both of those buckets full of water into the stove. Now it warms up as we are heating the stove in the daytime. And so that's what we use throughout the day, also to fill the kettle with.
And we got boiling water in the kettle. We got a wash basin my dad made out of the cap of a truck rear end. That's a wash basin. We keep it on the stove so it's hot, then we got the reservoir for hot water too.
What do you use the hot water for?
Well, for washing. If you got there's, as you can see here, there's a lot in the sticky syrup and that. It takes a lot of hot water to wash things.
Now, what are these funny-looking things?
Well, these are drums that we've cleaned. I don't usually use them. I didn't use them last year, but if we do have a surplus of sap, sometimes we got to use them.
Let me tell you,
they're all upside down there.
When we get the surplus is often after the Sabbath day. We do not do any boiling of syrup or any gathering of syrup on the Sabbath from Friday night sundown until Saturday night sundown. So guess what we do many times when we're sugaring on a Saturday night after the sun goes down?
Sometimes we got to gather for hours.
It could be till 1 or 2 or whatever time, but we have to finish it, because otherwise the sap will be running over. And the other thing is that we'll be missing sap if it is running over, and we have to.
That isn't always the big problem either with buckets. Sometimes it turns really cold, and I've seen it stay cold for 3 or 4 days, and it'll actually freeze hard enough to break the buckets if we don't get the sap out of it. We'll be gathering at night, and the ice be building up on the pails at the last. And
we have used all of these drums.
One
these
time,
huge drums.
We've gathered 8 times 40, 320 gallons, what's that in liters at once, 4 times that, so you're running up at 1,500 liters one gathering.
Wow.
And it takes us about 6 or 7 hours to do that.
How many trees do you tap?
I don't know how many trees, but we've got about 430 taps. We could tap 600 taps, but we don't have the manpower. Phyllis and I are getting a little bit older. We're 70 and we're 70 and 75 now, so it keeps you. That's why we're such young. We run around the trees. You'll see them more in another picture, but in the background you see the sugar camp and the steam rolling down.
Our neighbors across the street yesterday said, "You guys are healthier than we are." I said, "Well, we run up and down the stairs all the time." Anyway, this is slab wood, and now Ivan's the one in charge of the slab wood, and thankfully we have a sawmill. Therefore, whatever slabs are left over, we're able to choose from them to have. And so an electric saw, well, not electric.
No, a power saw. Gas saw. You know, like you cut on trees with.
Is part of the equipment as well. Good.
Now you don't need to have slab wood to boil sap. My parents and I do too. We go around the bush and pick up old dead wood, hardwood, and bring there, but you should pick it up the year before and let it dry. It's nice if you have it covered, because you can't pick it up when you need it in the spring, because it's under 2 or 3 feet of snow usually, so you better have it prepared ahead. The slab wood, since it's handy, I use it. We boil with wood on the one arch, which you'll see in a few minutes, and we boil with sawdust inside. I'll talk about that too.
Okay, here we have canners. What's that for?
This is the one canners, and once we take the syrup, this is the way we do it. Now the new way is they got all automatic equipment, but we do it the old-fashioned way. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of work no matter how you do it.
There's our cook stove.
There's a cook stove, and the cold pack canner. We got syrup in it. After we take it off the arch, we put it in there to finish it. We'll talk about that more later.
And this is a sieve, and we use the sieve for taking off the debris, which a lot of it is sand, that comes up to the top after we clarify the syrup. So we'll be showing you more about that in a little while. But the sieve sits in a pot, just like that.
You have to realize that when the sap comes up from the ground, there's a certain amount of sand that comes up with it. And it builds up on our pans. Every year or two we have to clean our pans that we boil with, because you'll build a coat of that, and then it takes a lot more heat to boil.
He doesn't mean just clean the pans. We clean them every time, but he's talking about really
I'm talking about this buildup. It's like calcium, except it's from, and it's hard. You just don't. It isn't just something you scrub off. We actually got a special solution there that we actually scrubbed it with the last time we got it clean, but it's hard. My dad used to chip it off, but that was hard on the pans, but we finally found something that would work.
Now this is the sawdust hamper.
Hopper.
Hopper, sorry. Oh, I put the wrong word there. Sorry, it's a hopper. Anyway, this is for the inside arch, and we use the sawdust there, whereas the slabs you saw earlier are for the outside arch. And by the way, the word arch, I didn't know it before we did maple syrup, and that is, an arch is the whole long process, equipment that where it burns, where the fire burns.
And you put the pans right straight on the fire. Like the pans make part of the fire box. Now, how often do you have to fill this hopper?
Oh, we'll be talking about that in a little while, but
okay.
It's every 15 minutes. And believe me, it's a lot of bending over. Okay.
Now this one is the outside arch. It burns wood, and you got to put wood in it every 10 to 15 minutes. And this is one here. Is this a movie?
No, it's not a movie. We'll be coming to some movies a little bit later.
Anyway, this I'm dipping there. The sap comes in. You can see the hose coming in. It comes in where it's the hottest. We've got 4 pans in each one. And as it boils down, we can boil about 55 or 60 gallons of sap an hour. That's 240 liters or something an hour. We have them hoses, and they just run steady. But as it boils, you got to keep dipping back and keep sapping all the pans. And as you get closer to the back, it gets closer to syrup. We'll be showing you that later on.
Okay, this next picture is the chimneys. Now let me say, the chimneys are very, very important, as you can imagine, but more than that, they're heavy. Ivan says they're not heavy, but he's so strong. Anyway, we have to put these up every year just before we have our maple syrup making. And these pipes, Ivan uses a forklift. What do you do with the forklift?
Well, I put a pole on the forklift and I lift them up. Phyllis kind of guides it, and then I get it down slow and I put it in place. Now, this picture was taken at night. It was getting dark and we were boiling late. And you see these two pipes. If you look at the top, it's kind of reddish at the top. That's the steady stream of sparks coming out of there. And I can turn those pipes, actually with sawdust, I can turn those pipes red hot about 6 or 7 feet up the pipes, but it'll set the camp on fire then. I keep the flame about 3 or 4 inches up the pipes, so I want the flame underneath the pans, but not up the pipes. So we regulate the airflow to keep the pan boiling. I can actually take ice in the pans and have it boiling in 10 minutes with the sawdust.
Good. Now, in case you didn't know, we do have to have maple trees. And so you see here our sugar camp with a lot of maple trees around. That's called our sugar bush.
And you can even see the solar panel on that one. The sugar camp, my dad set it up in the early 50s on a side hill, so that we come in at the top side, the left-hand side in the picture. There's a road there, and we come in with the tank, and when you pull the plug, it's all gravity fed. It goes down to other tanks, and then from there the hoses come out and it's gravity fed into the pans. So we don't need electricity there.
Saves some work too.
Well, yeah.
Okay, buckets, spiles, and a drill. This is so very important. The buckets, as you know, we would hang it on the spile. The spile is what we put into the tree, and Ivan is the one that uses the drill.
If you notice the bark on this tree, remember when you're tapping maples in the spring, there's no leaves on them. So you got to better tell your trees from the bark. And maple bark varies greatly from tree to tree. The younger trees have a much smoother bark, as you'll see in the next picture. Then this older tree has a much rougher bark. It isn't moving yet.
Can you? Okay.
Oh. There.
Okay, you can see here the other bark, the younger bark that I was talking about. You really need to learn what a maple tree is from an ash or an elm or whatever other trees. This is something I've spent a long time learning such a thing. Okay, the next one. Painting. There we go. Okay.
Okay. We have some pipeline, and we're using pails like this. You can put 3 or 4 together. You'll get, if I was going to start with nothing today, I inherited all this. I would never go to buckets. I would go to something like this, because you can get, you'll get more sap per tap with this. The taps, instead of being 7/16 of an inch big, they're 5/16 of an inch. And the reason why we number them, because we put them back, we take the hoses out and wind them up and clean them, and we put them away. We put them at the pail at the number, so the next spring we can come back to the same trees and the hoses will be the right length for where we're putting them. So that's the way we do it. However, for a big operation, they put main lines through the woods and they leave them there all year. But then every spring they have to check that the squirrels haven't eaten a hole in it. Then they got to flush them through with solution to get them clean. We clean these things individually as we go, and it works very good. I've tapped stuff I never tapped before. Places I had to crawl on my hands and knees to get up the hill to tap it. But
with the snow, and you could have
it works very well, and it works best on a bush that you have gravity fed. We have that at our bush.
And also, I'd like to point out here, we found out that spraying paint numbers on the trees for each of the pipelines is the best way to do it. I spend a long time making maps and putting down every tree and everywhere, we were doing. And that wasn't half as useful as just spray painting the number on the trees. We finally came to that. So if you're going to do it, start off with that. Anyway, you'll see the number 5 there on this tree. And so every tree that has that pipeline is a number 5.
See, got
And
5 on the bucket too.
Yeah,
It happened to be that one.
It makes it really easy then for us. Yeah, so my maps aren't being used. Can you imagine? All that work.
I tried to use a map from a commercial guy. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
But if you're new to the country and don't want a maple tree looks like, in the summer they got leaves on them, and you can take your paint can, go through the woods, and mark your maple trees. So in the spring, when there's no leaves, you know that you're tapping a maple tree and not an oak or an ash or something else. It doesn't bother me. I know. Although I did tap a white oak there a few years ago by mistake. I wasn't looking. There was no sap from it, though.
This picture now shows creativity. You see, you may want to have more taps than you have buckets. And so we put all our buckets up, but if we need more, we use whatever cans we have. And we always wash them, of course, ahead. But
these were cans that olive oil came in, but they were only 3 liters. So I fastened 2 together, put a little pipe, and then we got a 6-liter can, which is you can get most of the runs. Now, actually, this bucket here is a 2-gallon bucket. I don't know what that is to.
8 liters.
Well, it's about 9 liters. It's 2 Canadian gallons to 4.5 liters. So it's 9 liters. And then we got trees that were filled this in one day.
Wow.
Oh yes.
This one here is 1.5 gallons. And I know which trees run the best, so I put big buckets on the ones that run the best. Then I got some that's 1.25 gallons, and some that's 6 liters, and some that's only 4.5 liters. But I put them on the trees I know that run the best, so I don't lose the sack.
And it's very interesting. I would have never believed I would learn the trees too. These trees are almost like our children. We know which tree runs which way. We've got, a little bit later, you're going to see double dripping. And we know which trees end up doing the double dripping. Don't ask me why, but we'll show you that. And we know which trees are doing different things. So they're almost like people to us. But I wanted to say about this, these 2 containers that Ivan welded together, that when the one bucket fills, it goes through a tiny little hole to the next one, and that's how we don't lose so much.
Yeah, I put a little
sap.
copper tube there and just soldered it, so it doesn't go.
Click it.
I might add to, when you're tapping a maple tree, some people tap it on the south side at the same height. I got a sawmill. I've sawed lots of maple. By the way, I've sawed lots of spirals too. More cast iron spirals would break off.
That they
One
didn't
bush
take out.
years ago, my uncle was sawing for my dad. He had 123 spirals and 125,000 feet. If they didn't butt them things, then they would break them. But when you tap a maple tree, you can tap it high and low and all the way around. The south side would run first, but the north side would run later. So I've seen trees almost cut in 2. I've had boards almost falling in 2 in the mill because they almost cut them in 2 because they always tapped at the same height at the same place. So it's good to space it all the way around.
It's like doing an IV on patients. We never put the IV back in the same place because a scar forms. And the same thing happens with the tree, that we always try to find a new spot for it, and whether it's high or low, and that has something to do with dumping the buckets later too, by the way.
And by the way, you can't leave the spirals in for the next year. That doesn't work. I've had people ask me, can you leave it into the next year? No, you got to take it out. You got a fresh tap every year. And sap, people say, oh, I'll tap and I'll gather on the weekend. It doesn't work that way. Sap doesn't keep well. And early in the season when it's cold, it'll keep longer, but sap doesn't keep well if it gets hot. You've got to do something with it. So if you're going to make maple syrup, you better be ready to work when the weather decides to be cooperative, which is you Yeah, but it has to freeze and it has to thaw. Whether it freezes at night and thaws in the day, which is normal, or it freezes in the day and thaws at night, but you got to have -5 to +5 or +6, something like that. That's the idea. Although I've seen it run later in the season, if you get -1 and +1, it'll run then. The trees don't always go with what you think in the weather, but you do have to have freezing and thawing.
Now this is a video coming
Well,
up.
this is a video.
What you doing, honey?
This is us tapping. This was last year, and it was about snow was about 2 feet deep.
Staggering. Okay, say hello.
Hi. Oh, I didn't know you were taking a picture.
No. Did you have a good day?
I had a wonderful day.
Yeah? And
Tired,
do you like tapping trees or gathering the sap?
Well, I like the maple syrup the best.
Anyway, did you notice how Ivan was staggering through the snow? And this is what we have to do at the beginning of the season. The season is in the winter, and then it moves toward the spring. So this is always for maple syrup.
It was a tough year this year. The snow was deep, and it was just a tough year to get around totally.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is another video, and this is showing the sap running.
Everything's idea. This is a ready sap.
That is really running great. Isn't that one going good?
Yeah. That's the way it runs. That's the way it runs when it's ideal conditions. They don't. So it doesn't always run like
And
that.
look
But
at the
under
bark
ideal.
on that tree. You need to start learning maple trees.
This is an older tree here.
Okay. Now.
Actually, I got a cherry pail on that one. It's about a 2-gallon pail.
So now this is a double dropping. Just watch how this drips. See the double drops? Isn't that interesting?
And what you hear in the background is the tractor running.
Yes. Good.
And here's another video.
There's ice in the bucket here. Notice that. Okay.
Yeah, well, the ice from the day before, but it melts. And basically, we don't worry too much about the ice. If you want a real sweet drink of sap, go in the morning when there's a bit of ice is froze, because the water freezes first and the sugar sap is left, and it's really sweet what's left. So if we have to throw a bit of sap away, it's mostly water, or a bit of ice away, it's mostly water anyway. Don't worry about it.
Okay. This is again the sap dripping. You can see how the sap is running. You can also see the bark on this tree. It's a maple. Okay, so we now can see how the sap comes out of the tree, and now we're going to start gathering.
This is the tractor I use. It's a David Brown 900 series. They were only made in 3 years, 56, 57, or 58. It's all. But it works good, and we got a tank on. You see the tank on the back? It holds about 42, 43 gallons, and that's what we use. I can put it up and down with a 3-point hitch, so we put it down low to dump the sap in and raise it up. This is what we take it to sugar camp in. It takes us about, under good conditions, 45 minutes, under poor about an hour, but we average about an hour per tank full, and if you gather 8 tanks, we can go 7 or 8 hours to gather everything.
Now, if you notice the little thing sticking out of the gathering tank at the back, this is where we pour our sap into, and this is the very first filter. You're going to see as we talk further that there's a number of processes of filtering from the beginning, but this is the first filter, so if any leaves have fallen into the sap or anything like that, this is all filtered out right at the very beginning. Go.
Oh. This is where you get gathering the sap. Oh, is that a video?
You're pouring? No, it's not.
I'm gathering sap here. You usually keep the pail in your left hand and dump the bucket with your right.
Okay.
And we go from one to the other.
And so this is showing the fire here. But can you also see how Ivan is dressed?
This was what the last day of March this year. And it was cold. You can see I had my collar up. It was raining that day, and about +1. We had a lot better weather in February than we did in March. But you can see the fire there.
Well, can I tell you something before he moves the picture off? You see this glove here? This is a leather glove, and this is what gave me the courage. Because let me tell you, that fire scared the life out of me when I first started helping with the outside arch. The inside arch, of course, the sawdust, that was just a lot of bending and doing. But the outside arch with the fire, but I had to pray to God and ask for help because it really was a tough thing for me. So I said, okay, Lord, I got to open this door. So then I opened up the door, and then I had to pick up these slabs and shove them in. It's a whole process. It wasn't too long until I was able to do it without too much trepidation.
May I say this about this? The process is simple. You got to boil about 40 gallons of sap, about 40 to 140 gallons of sap, 4 times to get 4 liters, 4 times 4 liters, 40. So anyway, you got about 160 liters to get 4 liters of syrup. It's a 40 to 1, and you got to whether you do osmosis, which they buy equipment with a lot of money, or whether you boil it, some way you got to get rid of the 39 parts and have 1 part left, and that's your maple syrup. So this is basically what you have to do.
Now, before we start this video, I'd just like to say that in either arch, in both arches, the idea is to dip the sap from the one pan where it comes in as pure sap, and to dip from that pan to the next one, and the next pan to the next one, and the next to the next one. So in other words, it's coming closer and closer to syrup, and it's actually made into syrup at the last pan. So we're constantly having to do this along with filling the hopper with sawdust or putting the slab wood in. Yes.
Now these next 2 pictures, you see a lot of smoke coming out of the smokestack there, which is not normal. I had a big piece of pine slab which pitch, and I threw it in there, and it really made a huge heat, but it made a lot of smoke too.
And could we say at the same time that this is the reason why people do not boil the syrup in their kitchen? It makes the ceiling sticky, it makes the walls sticky, everything gets sticky. When you boil 40 of sap becomes 1 of syrup, so you can imagine how much boiling of this sap there is before you actually get the syrup.
Was that supposed to be a video?
This is a video, yeah.
No, this one is.
Oh.
Yeah.
The smoke is really coming out.
It doesn't usually smoke like that. Usually it's clear, you just have sparks, but I'd put this big... This was for effect so you could see it. And you can see the steam rolling. But you got to keep that boiling, because remember, we're boiling 30... We can pull off close to a gallon, so we're boiling close to 30, 35, 30, be 120... 130 liters an hour of sap. Yeah. So with the 2 units, we're boiling close to 300 liters of sap every hour with the 2 units, because we can get almost a 4-liter container off each one every hour if things are going right. So it takes a lot of heat. That's why we have heavy gloves, because everything you touch is hot.
Absolutely.
How long has to be boiled?
Till it comes up to where we take it off at, we're in Fahrenheit yet, we take it off at 219 degrees. Sometimes it's only 30 to 1, and you don't have to boil it as long. It depends how hot your heat is. You got to bring it up to a certain temperature, regardless of how long it takes.
In fact, this picture right here is part of the answer to the question about how long. Because before Ivan was creative and made something to help us. This inside arch boiled when it wanted to boil, because sometimes it would go down. It depend on the sawdust. If the sawdust was a little bit damp or this, we had to wait till it goes through. But then what did you do?
Well, the chimney wasn't quite big enough and long enough to have enough draft for it, and I knew it. And we were putting motor oil in with the sawdust, but that wasn't really satisfactory. So I finally got a little 12-volt fan like they use in the trucks, and that 7-inch, and I made a shroud for it. You can see it in the picture here, the shroud. Right there. You can see the shroud right around the fan, and it goes right into the hopper. So that little 12-volt fan, and with that I can put the flame right up the pipe till I set the pipes red hot and set the camp on fire. So I got three speeds on it, and then sometimes we have to put a paper over the backside of the fan to keep the draft down. But it works very effective. Now I got a 12-volt battery there. I got a solar panel with 100-watt solar panel, and we have also one light off it over the stove off this battery. But the solar panel, 100-watt, keeps it fully charged all the time.
Well, then after that, the fan would go hot, like really blow, and then the fire's really going, or then it wasn't. We'd turn it on and off. So Ivan had to make something to cause it to go a little bit, and then the very least, we put the newspaper over the fan, and that's how it works.
And you got to realize that both places we got dampers on the pipes, and when it's coming close to syrup, you shut the fan off and you pull the dampers, and sometimes we've had both dampers pulled to keep the syrup in the pan. It's quite a... if you think you're going to start it easy, Phyllis worked with me for about 5 or 6 or 7 years before I finally was confident she could stay alone and it wouldn't be boiling on the ground or running out of wood. No, there's just so much you're thinking about all the time. And if you're starting with no knowledge at all of it, it takes quite a knack to it.
Now in this next picture, you see here, it's almost like a mosaic of some kind of artwork. This is our sawdust pile. And why has it got all these colors?
Well, I blow it in with a blower. The blower is made up from an old inch-leach blower they used to blow at the silo years ago. But this is different kind of sawdust. There's be cedar in here, and there'd be tamarack, and that lighter colored stuff in the middle is probably spruce. I don't know what's on top. But as it comes in, and whatever I blow in, it makes layers, and it looks like this.
That's the proof for evolution.
And I put it up in the spring, inside where it's dry, and it'll heat by itself, and it dries enough by the next spring it's ready to burn.
So this next picture is going to show you what we do with this sawdust and how we have to deal. Ivan is knocking down some sawdust for us, and he's getting ready to get a big bear. Oh, that was a hunk.
That was only a little one. Sometimes a big hunk comes off at once.
What you doing, hon?
Bring down sawdust.
We have that right by the arch, so we just have to go 6 or 7 feet with it.
Well, this next one is usually my job. I get the inside job. Of course, if it's snowing or raining outside, poor Ivan has to do that one. But anyway, this is our hopper right here, and this is what we have to fill. Certainly every 15 minutes, if not more often. And you get the scuttle. You bend over, you get the scuttle, you get your sawdust and get up and put it in, and then you do that over and over 7 times, fills the hopper, and you do that every 15 minutes. If that was all you had to do, you could rest in between. But you can't do that because you have to do that dipping, remember, from one pan to another, and that's only for the inside arch. If Ivan is out gathering sap while I'm there, then I do both arches. And so you have to have a whole routine. And it includes putting a stick in the wood stove, coming over, doing the hopper, coming over, dipping, and you have to check to see because there's a hose coming in with the sap, and you have to make sure it's not running too fast or too slow. You can't let your pans get empty, and you cannot let them run over. So, so it's a whole process around.
And she also fires up outside of them, not there. So you just go and there isn't much time for laying down and sleeping. We do have a place where you can lay down with cushions on there, but we don't use it much.
And what I've done is I've got it down to a science. So I look at I know from seconds even, and if there's 1 minute or 2 minutes before I have to go back to the hopper to do it, I do lie down, because you really have to, it's just like your heart can't beat every second. It rests in between every beat, and so you have to take a rest sometimes too.
Now this shows the outside arch.
And the slab wood there that has to be put in.
This is not a video, eh?
No.
Okay, I will just say one thing that you have in the spring. If you notice right there, that's all brown, black, it's burnt. Yeah. This area up here, late in the season, the brush and that will take fire from the sparks, and I seen the flame 6 feet high. It never spreads too far because the road goes around that, but I tried to burn it. Before it gets too dry, controlled burn instead of a runaway burn, because it is scary if it gets going in the wrong place. You don't want to burn down the sugar camp.
Okay, this next picture now shows the thermometer. We have the 2 thermometers down here on the table, and one is a digital thermometer, and the other is what they call a candy thermometer, or just a regular one that has more, I don't know how to explain it, but anyways, like a regular thermometer that has red that goes up. It's much easier to use a digital thermometer. If you're going to choose what to purchase, definitely use digital, because the number comes up exactly as it is. And you can see on here that we put it in to the sap. We have to put it just a little above the bottom of the pan, not touching the bottom, and read it that way. Okay.
We take it off at 219 degrees Fahrenheit. Actually, we take it off at 220. Surface at 219. This sap is boiling here. It's at 217 degrees. When you start boiling sap, it would be about 210 degrees. So, but as the water evaporates out of it, the temperature gradually rises. When it gets to 219 degrees Fahrenheit, you've got syrup. I think that's about 67 or 68 Celsius. Actually, that digital thermometer is easy. You can just hit a button and it turns to Celsius for you. I have never, but I think that's, but anyway, we go with Fahrenheit. That is legal yet.
Okay.
You can see the way it's starting to turn brown, 217 degrees, that golden color.
And I might say, while we've got the 217 on here, that in some places they're changing the standard. In order to have syrup, it's supposed to be 219 degrees. However, it's coming off at 217.
218 sometimes.
Yeah, and 218 as if it were completed syrup. So much of the syrup that you get in the stores and that is very, very thin, because it isn't true syrup yet. And we make ours pretty thick.
The problem is, with digital things, these electronic things, you can actually kind of superheat it, and it'll actually come up for a second and show something, and then it'll drop back. But if you have your thing set to come off automatic, once it hits that, it's going to come off when it's not actually there to hold it for that length of time, because it'll hit 217 and it'll drop back, and they'll hit it and go back and forth, but we wait till it's steady.
And the other thing on here is, do you see these bubbles are white or very light colored? You're going to see in the next picture that the bubbles are browner, and the white bubbles come around the 217, but until they really get to be dark brown bubbles and really boiling, it's not actual syrup yet.
You can see this boiling.
The syrup is 219, and we wait till it gets up to 220 so that it's for sure solidly 219, so we don't have to finish getting it up there on the stove later when we're preserving it. Now you see these little bubbles? And when these bubbles move, they start a rolling boil. You got to watch it or it falls out of it. runs right out of the pan.
Over the top.
Right over the top, and that's the worst, because 40 of sap makes 1 of syrup. So when your syrup boils over, you've lost a lot of sap. We're watching till it hits 220.
Actually,
But I wanted you to see the bubbles.
we probably got the
Little
heat.
brown bubbles.
You got to
That's
cut
what's
the.
getting right
We
near
cut the
the-
heat way back when it's like this.
Okay, I can't leave it on till 20 because we gotta really move fast once that comes.
When it gets to this temperature, you got to cut your fan way back. We often got one damper pour. We got two pipes. We got one poured, and don't take your eyes off it for a second. You turn around, and when you turn back, it'll be up at the top of the pan. It just that stuff just rises so quickly. And you see when it's boiling like that, that's the way I take it off. That pan is about that wide. I put on my leather gloves, I grab the pan, I take it off boiling like that and dump it in the cold back canner.
This is
dump.
where Ivan has to dump it into the cold pack canner from the pan, flat pan.
And
It's a tricky thing.
I have heard of people slipping with hot sap and dumping it down their boot. Just down here, this is probably in the early 80s, a 4 or 5 year old kid, he fell into the pan. Just a couple of months, just a mile or so from here. He was up on the bank and kind of scalded his one arm. He had heavy clothes on, luckily, and he wasn't too seriously, but yeah, he got where he wasn't supposed to. So you have to be really careful with this. Everything you handle is hot.
Okay, click. Now this one you're going to be seeing, this is a video you'll be seeing, but remember we mentioned about clarifying. We have to clarify the sap. This is another process that goes through over and above becoming syrup, so that it's a nice clear syrup. And remember, Ivan mentioned a little bit ago that sand comes up in the sap as part of the sap. And so we have to get all of that and the debris, anything that has come up in the tree, in the sap with it. And so you're going to watch this now and you'll see what we do. We're clarifying the sap now, the syrup. And 2 of our draws are in this one pot.
Be about 12 liters, 12,
And
13
we're waiting
liters.
for it to boil again. Once we put in the soy milk, we have to let it come back to a boil.
And we'll put
And it
soy
needs to
milk
be
in
a
for
really
years.
rolling boil. Now,
We
do you see
use
that
milk
little
there, you
hole
can use
there?
eggs, but
That's
we
where
put
it's
soy
going to
milk in
start
it.
boiling first. All these little white bubbles come on the top before it starts boiling. It's going to come up in a few minutes, but you have to be so careful it doesn't boil over. That's the worst.
You can see the flames through the hole in
Here
the
it comes.
stove
It's
there.
starting to boil. It's starting to bubble. Not long now. You really got to watch it. And then once it has to come up like a rolling boil. And that way all the things from the tree, whatever, will get in, will gel in it, and then we take all that off. There, now it's starting to really boil. That's coming up. I got to get my gloves on and grab it before it gets too much. Okay, here we go. Okay, what I like to say is that we use soy milk for our clarifying, and as our brother was just mentioning, some people do use lard for their, at times when they need something to bring the syrup down so it won't boil the pan. If we need something like that, we use just a touch of margarine.
Some of you have been there when I was boiling, but if this, I'm talking about not, well, even syrup, but even sap. If it gets really hot in the pan, just a little bit of fat, you just touch it and it brings it down to a certain point. People do, I've seen them hang a bag like cheesecloth or something. Yeah, like or some fat or ham or something. They'll hang it at the height they want in the pan, so when the sap touches it, it goes down. We don't use any of that, of course. But now this, what this milk does when you boil it, the sand and that congeals to it. We take it off, let it cool, then we take that sieve that we saw earlier and we scoop it off. So you don't have to take it off when you're going through the strainer. So you get a lot of your junk off this way. But that's also why we bring it to 220, because it usually drops it back about a degree. So then when we get done taking it all off, we check it's still at 219. And then I take that boiling thing, it's boiling like this, I take it with my gloves, and I take it and I pour it into this
another filter.
in this filter, this final filter.
Filters it goes through. This is not cheesecloth. Cheesecloth would let much go through. This is a bed sheet type thing. It's very, very tightly woven. So only the syrup goes through this one.
It's cotton, but not cotton flannelette. It's cotton, really, really fine.
Yeah, tightly woven.
And of course, see, my dad made, I inherited this stuff. My dad made the pans and the arches and that. There was no money years ago. This is a bowl from a cream separator. If anybody's seen a cream separator, used to have them. They used to have a hand crank. I can remember at my grandfather's place, them cranking up to the bell ring, get the right speed, and it would separate. But this is the bowl from it, and that's what we use for putting the syrup in, just straining it.
Before we show this video, you might want to mention what you do.
Well, this is putting the syrup from the bowl into the bottle. Now I got to stand there and watch it pretty close. You can't let it run too fast because it foams, and then but we watch it there.
What are you doing right now, honey?
You see where I got a headlight on my head there, so I can see.
And it's running in nicely. You can show me.
Yeah. You can actually probably see the. Yeah, you can see the syrup running there.
You just keep watching it and don't run over the bottom. That's how you just go.
And this syrup we can it hot. It's been boiling, so you can it hot so it seals.
And then what's this funny looking stuff here on the edge?
That's the junk
That's filtered out. That we filtered out, and it goes into this bucket at the bottom.
That's what we need the hot water for. Lots to wash that out before we leave.
Where the syrup is going through the cloth, which is the final filter. This is like a sheet goes through.
Now
See how it's gone down.
the raccoons love to eat
And
this.
then we move the sheet, and it goes through us. How is it? Is it coming out nicely?
coming out nicely.
And how did you get this kind of a bowl?
It's a cream separator.
Cream.
Yeah, you can see the cap on it from the cream
Put the
separator
milk in and then it
with the years ago.
separate the milk from the cream.
You can see Ivan's headlight there.
And here's the finished product. We got it full.
Yes.
And my hands are pretty tough, so I can pick it up. But if you were around the side of it, it would be too hot. I pick it up there, it was a little bit cooler on the handle. But it's hot when we put it in there because I just dumped it in boiling.
Well, Ivan said he liked tasting it the best, so guess what he's doing here?
Well, we eat there too, so this is finishing off the meal, a bit of maple syrup with bread.
Well, before our last video picture here, I'd like to mention, I'm sorry, I took this picture and my camera turned different ways, but you'll still be able to see. This is the very last process, and that is to remove the spirals from the trees.
Now, if you have to lay on your side to get it right, don't go to sleep. This is late in the season. Some of the trees are drying up, and
All right, what are you going to do?
Okay, this one is starting to dry up, so I'm going to take the spiral out of it with this special tool I made.
You made that tool?
Yeah.
And you're getting the spiral out of the piece?
Yeah. Like that.
There it is. Okay. What are you doing?
Get into sap.
Oh,
You see how we gather it and carry it to the tank. This is a sap bucket. This goes like this, and you got a lid over it. A lot of ours don't have lids, but more sophisticated ones, they have lids. I'll get it in there, yeah. When that hangs on the tree, hangs like that, and the lid flops up so you can dump it. This is a aluminum spiral. You can get aluminum buckets. This is aluminum bucket. This one is a galvanized steel, which was quite common years ago with a galvanized spiral. I got all kinds of different things. I was going to bring you a cast iron spiral, but I forgot. But basically, this tool that I made out of a piece of coil spring to take them out. This is the tool here, and I can get and catch them and yank them out. This is how we used to tap the maples for years with the brace and bit. I tapped lots of them, but it does get tiring after a while. And these things, I bought 4 of them down in the States. I should have bought more. I got them about $3.50 down there. They're solar powered, and they're great lights. You can just, actually I hold my hand over it. I think it will come on. Got to get it dark enough. There. It will come on. But they're great at night. You can just put them where you need them, and they charge up themselves. Also, now I got this is what I use to tap now. I got a drill with a battery, and it'll do 35 or 40 taps. I keep 2 batteries. They just snap off. I got a little power inverter, 400 watt power inverter. You plug the charger in right on the battery on the tractor. And when one's dead, I go over and grab them and just change them and keep on tapping. And I got some old spirals. The old spirals, for the most part, were 7/16, which is this diameter. I got a few that's 1/2 inch this diameter. And the new ones for the pipeline, the new spirals are all 5/16, much smaller. However, this is what I've used for years, but I said I better bring it and see what you're going to get. If you want to go and buy at the hardware the right tapping equipment, they'll sell you a bit like this. We'll see where they'll bore in a few minutes. That's a 7/16, and this one is the 5/16. You see the difference in the size? And you get just as much sap out of this little hole as you will out of this big hole, or out of this big hole that it took for this old wooden spiral. The size of the hole doesn't seem to make much difference.
Okay, so now we have finished the lecture part, and we have maple syrup here that you are able
But
to taste.
maybe they want a question or something.
Okay, maybe you want to do questions and answers. Yes, Billy.
I didn't catch how the bottles were sealed for your. Because I know, like, once you open it, you have to keep it refrigerated. But before that, they were all.
Yeah, because
How did that happen?
We buy them.
no, the bottles, when it's coming out of that container, it's just about boiling hot, and it's so hot that it just seals when it cools. Yeah, I pour that in there boiling, and it's hot enough it just seals when it cools.
It needs to be at least 160 degrees, and I'm taking it off. It's probably about 200.
Well, 219, it's boiling when I put it in.
Back on to boil. It's
Yeah, so-
totally boiling when we put it through the
Now, if you buy pipeline that comes in 100-foot rolls or 500, this is a 500-foot roll. Some of it I got left. That's and if you want to put line all through your woods, you got to get bigger line than that. Your main lines. This is just you can put 4 or 5 taps to line like this, and you get I'll get this one out. This one's got 3 taps on it. Make sure your first tap, you see it's got a T in it. This will be the first tap that I got the highest. I got a little short piece of line here with an air vent on it, so it will drain the hose out as much as you can at night. The other end will go in the bucket. I got a hole through the side of the bucket here someplace. Yeah, right there. It will go in through that hole. There. It go in through the hole, and we put the lid on it, and then it can run into that.
So you put all three of them around the tree then?
Well, sometimes it's one tree. This actually probably came off of one tree, a big tree. But sometimes we have 3 or 4 different trees if they're small, and the line is long. Sometimes it's 40, 50 feet.
Everyone is different, and it depends. That's why we put numbers on them. So sometimes it's a long ways from
But
one tree to another.
it's best, some people don't vent the first one, but it's best to vent the first one because then it can drain out at night when it's just better.
Tell them what happened with the squirrel.
Well, I had one a couple of years ago when I had to crawl my hands and knees to, and I know it was halfway through the season, it wasn't running as much, but I never went up to check it, but when I picked it up, it had a nice little hole through it, a squirrel had bit a hole through it, halfway up. So, but don't worry about that. The next year you buy a coupler. I got some in there. You just cut the line and you put a coupler in, a straight coupler, and keep on using it.
Question back here.
What diameter of tree is a 3-spile tree?
Well,
It's 3 feet, huge. It's really huge.
oh, this one?
Big tree that has
Oh,
trees.
it's probably. I cut one of these last fall for wood because it was falling down. It was getting past. I hadn't tapped it for 3 or 4 years because it wasn't running anymore. But I got an 18-inch blade in my saw, and I lacked 6 inches of going through it. I went all the way around with an 18-inch blade, and I lacked 6 inches of getting through it. But it was leaning heavy, and it just broke that 6 inches off. So that'd be 36 plus 6. That'd be 42 inches across that particular tree.
And then for the 2, how big would that be?
2 feet. 2 feet.
Slides, how big would that be?
To put 2 spiles in the same tree.
Oh.
How big?
Yeah, you'd want probably a couple of feet maybe.
And how small for one?
Oh, 10 to 12 inches. I wouldn't. No. Although I have seen people tap them smaller, but I don't recommend it. It's
Not fair for the poor beast.
we're going to take you out here in a few minutes, and we'll. Mel's got 2 or 3 maple trees out here. We'll show you how to tap a maple tree. Yes.
Question?
This is probably the dumbest question ever asked. But is there a specific maple tree that you only tap a certain maple tree? Is it a certain type? Because there's different kinds, right?
The
No,
hard
yeah.
maple.
It's a hard maple. You can top a soft maple, but a soft maple, which you find in the swamps, you can make maple syrup with it, but it'll take about 90 gallons to 1, about 90 to 1 instead of 40, 45. It's not near sweet. I have heard people making sap out of birch trees, birch sap, but
80.
fine. It's
80
bitter. Yeah,
to
it's
1.
bitter. But I tapped a white oak by mistake one year because the bark looked almost like a maple, and I really didn't look up at the limbs that time, and it never ran a drop. After it didn't run a drop, I looked at it again. I said, "Oh, I better take the spile out of that." But that was only once. And there was one tree we had years ago. It must have been about 4 feet. And when my dad, we called it a butternut tree because it looked like a butternut. And the first year he tapped it, he said, "I think it's a maple." It was a maple, but it almost looked like a butternut. So it can be deceiving even people working wood all their life. I got a sawmill, and I know the different species of logs by their bark because they give me sawing orders, and they want the maple cut one way, and the cedar, and the something else, and the ash. They got different orders for different species. So I got through the years, I know the trees by their bark, but they can be deceiving even for people that work with it sometimes.
Can you tell by the shape of the leaf, or is it?
Well, I said if you,
I don't even know what a hardwood is.
Yes, the leaves
Well, we'll-
are on a soft and a hard.
when you come out here to the maple, you'll see the leaves and the hard maple. There's 3 hard maple out here that Mel has right up by the house. So
question.
So just have 3 questions. So how long is the process from beginning to end? Your drain pipe, is it reusable? And how do you keep it clean? And the sediment from second filtration process, can you reuse? Is there any useful residue? Is it useful in any way? I know you did say the raccoons love it.
Yeah, it just goes out. It just goes out in the ground. We throw it away. It's not reusable. You wouldn't want to eat that stuff.
When someone is asking a question, can you repeat the question?
Okay, to repeat the question, there were 3 questions here, and the third one is the one we answered first. He wanted to know the debris that we take off at the end. What do we do with that? Is there any use for it? And Ivan said no, he didn't think anybody would want to use that. It's really full of sand. It's so thick. It's no use that we would have for that.
You asked about the lines whether you can reuse them. Yes, you reuse them. Normally, in a big operation, they put lines that are bigger than this, and they leave them strung from tree to tree. Now, if you want to be a bigger operation, leave them strung from tree to tree. These things are made with the kind of shape for plugs, so they can plug the end of the line. After the sugaring season, they go around, they pull the spirals, they pull this part out of the tree. They wait 2 months with that out, so the lines that will air out. Then they go around and put the plugs in the end for the rest of the year. But then they have to flush a solution through that in the spring to clean it. We put them like this, so when we take them up, I put water. I made a nozzle, hook it on, put water through it, then I take the air, 150 pounds of air, and blow it out. Then we put them away so they're clean.
Okay, then the other question was, from start to finish, how long does it take 1 drop of sap to get all the way through to become syrup?
Well, this year, our season was about 8 weeks, which is unusually long. Usually you get about 4 weeks.
Are you going to add the time for us to gather the sap from the tree? That's a whole process.
Yeah, well, like I said, it takes us 160 liters, takes an hour to gather it, but you have to have, you just don't sit down and boil that. You get a lot of it at once, because like I said, it takes a lot of sap going through these 300 liters an hour or so. So when you get your tanks full, and then you start it up. But on good days when it's running good, basically we'll boil from 7 or 8 in the morning to 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Then we gather to dark, or an hour after dark. Then we repeat the same thing the next day. So we can probably get 25 or 30 liters. We'll get when it's running good, we'll get 7 of these a day. 7 4-liter. It's worth it. Well, you see,
it was worth $100 a gallon. Well, there's a lot.
We get $60 for 4 liters, and we get 35 for 2 liters, and 20 for 1 liter. Now, if you think that's a lot of money, back in the 50s, my parents were making syrup, and the gallons were then 4.5 liters. They got $5 a gallon for it then. And men worked for 50 cents an hour. They worked 10 hours a day for $5. So it was a whole day's wages to buy a gallon of syrup then. So you're getting a real deal now at 60 liters, because who works for $60 a whole day? You know, so so in comparison, the syrup is cheaper now than it was then.
Is there any other question? Yes.
I just have a question regarding the plastic and the heat. Because of the high heat, you actually perhaps...
Question using plastic bottles, and it's hot. So the question is...
Well, the plastic won't melt at that heat.
This type of plastic.
And this is a very hard plastic.
Yeah, it won't melt that heat.
Regular.
It's made special for it. It doesn't melt at that heat.
Any other questions? Yes?
How old should the tree be before you think about tapping it?
How old should the tree be before you tap
Well,
it?
you got to wait to a certain diameter. It's got to be
12 inches.
so big.
10 to 12 inches.
And
How many years does that take? Many, many years.
well, I'm tapping trees now. Actually, I don't know whether I can run back in this thing. I'll run back here. I'm tapping trees now that my dad, when we bought the place in 1949, which was 68 years ago, he could pull them up by hand then. And today they're from that diameter to this diameter, and I'm tapping them now.
Takes a lot of years to grow a tree.
But once it gets to that diameter, I saw a tree at that diameter, it grows to that diameter in about 20 years. They grow a lot, but to start with, it takes a long time. Let's see if I can get back here. Okay, you see the sugar camp here in the sugar camp's in the background, but these trees right here, 68 years ago, my dad could pull them up by hand. And that's the size of them today. They're ranging from that size, the biggest one is like that. So that's how long it takes to maple trees. So if you're going to plant your hard maple, make maple syrup, you want to plan on living for another 100 years or so.
Any other questions? Okay, so now we're going to, if anybody would like to taste the syrup, you can come on up here. You take a spoon and only dip it once. Gotta have a new spoon if you do twice.
Oh, I do have this catalog. They're very persistent. I've never canceled it. It comes every year to my place. It's got my dad's name on it, Dan Vallieres. So he's been dead for 27 years now, but they're still sending him a catalog every year. For your sugaring supply, you can look in here, and you some of it says go to the store to find the price of it. It would scare you, but it does show you the sugaring supplies, the bottles, and how much they cost and that. And if somebody would like to take it home, they're welcome to the catalog. I'll probably get a new one next spring.
Okay, so just come right on up if anybody would like to taste it. The syrup is right here. You just take a spoon. There's napkins here.
You see these headbands, they go on like this, eh?